I mentioned in my Dead Times video, I think, that while I was going through the iceberg of dietary aid albums, I believe around layer 4 came this one segment, a band called The Body, industrial and noise doom metal, I Shall Die Here, this album cover. I looked at it, shrugged, and thought not to expect much. I'm not huge for doom metal, frankly, as I don't love slower music. After going down the list of albums, I got to I Shall Die Here. It was one of the scariest albums I've ever listened to. Extreme metal is a genre that, to a degree, makes music that is both extremely visceral and inaccessible. It's also quite rare. There aren't many bands that step into extreme metal because metal's so harsh that even the most dedicated metalheads find it intense and rough is a task. Hi! I'm recording a video. What do you want? Nails, Napalm Death, and Stalag might be the only extreme metal bands I've ever found in the wild. However, The Body was the first band I could actually stomach without complications. Their combination of primal shrieks, noise, brutal drums, and grungy guitars made them a band no other could replicate. To a point, they were just a noise metal band, but they were a really good noise metal band. Nearly all of their albums are close to perfect. They all share this extreme desolation and apocalyptic doom that no other band creates. Their music can be agonizingly slow or fearfully fast. Dead Times was a great exploration of poetry, but I'm mainly here because I want to explore the Body's sound, or at least the album that introduced me to them. I Shall Die Here is interesting because it isn't just a The Body TMCR project. It was produced by the Haxan Cloak, who is, I have no idea, I learned about them right now. They're an electronic producer and basically made this album into industrial core. I Shall Die Here attracted me for many years, but listening to it, thinking it would just be some noise doom that I wouldn't jive with, I was scared while listening to this. I had to pause at track 2 to go on a walk and calm down. No album made my adrenaline run that badly before. I was shaking and scared and confused. It's an experience that even the other Body albums don't replicate. I certainly get intensity from the self-titled Christ Redeemers, Orchards of a Feudal Heaven, or No One Deserves Happiness, but I don't get primal fear from them. Even the album cover itself is distressing. It shows an earth drenched in darkness and almost appears frozen over. It's on a magazine at a price for $5. Obviously for the album, but I get the impression that Earth itself is so worthless it's not even worth reprinting the issue of the cheap magazine to sell it. It just has this overwhelming sickness to it. Initially, I wanted to save this for next Halloween, but I'll be frank, I got my wisdom teeth removed and the pain from that was agony for a couple days. It's muted now and I actually have my medication. Opioid crisis arc begin. And while it does make me soft and warm inside, it doesn't help at all with the pain. It also makes it hard to breathe. I remember this album specifically I would listen to when I was pissed and angry coming out of work, also while being in kind of terrible pain, either from an injury or just from strain. I mean, there were some days when I would be moaning in agony and this album was literally the only thing I could listen to. I say that because while I had my wisdom tooth pain, I couldn't listen to any music for a few days. This album was one of the first things I came back to. I want to use this video to talk about pain. And this is where it gets tricky. I'm going to summarize the graphic tone of each song before diving into how I interpret them. I'm going to go into some pretty dark details for this one because I did not like this year on the personal end and it ate away at me, including something that happened that was fairly intense. I'm going to talk about suicide and suicidal depression. I'm going to talk about depression and how severe pain can lead to it, how it leaves you paralyzed and broken, how loneliness and isolation can break you and bring out pain worse than if you had a community. It's going to get intense, and paired with the music and subject matter, prepare yourself. Note, there are no official lyrics anywhere to this album. The Body will not post it, so I'm going to assume the album doesn't have any. The album starts with horrifically harsh grungy guitar grumbles with a harsh snare slowly beating behind it. Violently seething synths play behind it, sounding like drills preparing to lobotomize your mind. The vocals are filled with reverb and echo, barely coherent as they desperately scream and cry out for anyone to hear them. Harsh shredding guitars play into a loud shrill before the breakdown begins. The heartbeat is fast, the lower bass begins to play stretched out over the horizon and wrapping around as the vocals become more distant and distorted. A kick drum begins to pulsate as the song reforms as machinery and distant bangs play off the song. The breakdown contains electronics and whispers along with distorted screams coming in and out of electric ambience. Distant slams of equipment alert off through the echoes. The grim dark atmosphere settles into a final pulsating kick drum before the song comes to its pitiable end, as an animalistic scream comes in and rushes before the song abruptly ends. The title refers to the nihilistic outlook of life. In a way, life itself is a seed that awaits to sprout death. However, the title refers to that kind of horror of being responsible, to spend each waking moment of your life with the possibility that one action could be the death of trillions of beings, that your paradise is merely the coat of pollution of something that you can't see, that life itself is a vessel to merely carry death. The song feels metallic and industrial, like a large industrial park of scum and pain. The shrieking vocals cry, plead, and hack. They echo to the sky. The song fills itself with immense dread and darkness. I really can't imagine any portion of this album with even the slightest amount of natural life. It feels drenched in black darkness, sickness, and artificial light. I can do this. This was the song I was worried about discussing.
I've got two choices. I either actually go through with it, or I say, you know what, I'm too scared right now. I don't want to do it.
It begins with a bleak and depressing monologue from somebody contemplating suicide, tempting their fate with the possibility of suffering themselves forever and spreading it about before dying away, or getting it done early to avoid the possibility of suffering.
And to inflict suffering on my family. And then die.
Their voice is both shaky and withdrawn, their thoughts are nihilistic and empty, and their voices matched with a strange wail alongside them, about the nature of suffering and how awful it is, while also noting the nature of suicide being an attempt to evade suffering. I've heard this argument before. The familiar guitar begins to play along the mild amounts of feedback, before the screams come back in along harsh industrial drums. They sound vaguely coherent here. "I'm so hungry" was one line I could barely make out, as the screams cry about the horrors of pain and suffering for the person, as the monologue comes back more into a confrontational tone.
We're thwarted, man. We're playing God. We have to let them die.
Where he lays out that it would just be better to let people die instead of prolonging their pain and suffering. The screams come back in and add on, presumably talking about the horrors of letting somebody suffer and the hell we create in our attempt to help. Before large electric synths come before the best fucking drum solo in any breakdown in any metal album ever. Yeah, I know too soon, but fuck you, it rules. It adds on to that tone of urgency as the song gets faster and faster, as the drums get harder and more intense, as the subtle siren plays in the background, the rumbling grows and grows. The terror of the dilemma grows in the mind like a fungus as the song becomes overwhelmed by noise and agony. The sirens alerting around the area fill the industrial noise below it. The song crumbles down into a more cut-off scream as it all relaxes. I saw a video, again by Scare Theater, years ago about this artist. I'm not sure if it's still up, but in the video the artist lamented on the nature of pain and prolonging it to help people. One of the things they said was that if a person is suicidal, it would be best to let them die if there's no way to help them in their pain, because telling them to continue would just be prolonging the pain. If a person spends their entire life in agony, whether physical or mental, It would just be better to let them choose how to end their suffering. It was intense. This song falls into a lot of that philosophy of how we shouldn't be priming people to spend each moment of their life trying to prolong life and suffering. I'm not here to tell you the answer, but a less misanthropic version of this is, should doctors help people end their lives by midlife crisis? It's a very serious video, but it goes over this in a way I can't. At least for this song. The subject of suicide and suffering is hard to really get into. However, this song is as much about the philosophy of pain as it is about contemplation. The nature of not only being in constant agony, but also in a way spreading that agony to others by being in that pain. The song feels completely hopeless because of this. The mood of it is just utter despair. I've had moments of tempting suicide before, and they sound like this. I should point out that this misanthropy is usually how people stay depressed or are coaxed into it by bad actors. I don't think people who are in pain should just give up. However, I get why this notion exists. If a person is terminally ill and they don't want to waste a life they feel they've had taken away, or even never at all. I get the idea of why we should let them choose their fate. I get why to people who are doomed to suffer eternally, the notion of it gets better is a luxury. I don't have the answer, because I'm not a god, and neither is this band, nor is the man in the monologue. I'm not going to go into any detail because of what it was, but I had a severe episode of contemplating suicide. It's why the last paragraph seems so distant, and that episode led me to try something that traumatized me badly. It hurt like hell, and it didn't help. I had no access to any weapon, but if I did, I guarantee I would have taken my life. That horror does not make me sympathetic to the nihilistic perspective. I'm glad I didn't do it, and I'll touch more on this later. The third track begins with a far more sinister tone right off the bat. Eerie, high-pitched strings play above a brutally harsh bass distorted as hell as a long, foreboding intro brings us into the night, slowly unraveling through hazy ambience and gloom. It feels like a storm approaching and overtaking the night as the black, viscous fog takes over the night to prevent any end in the misery. The screams come bleached in distortion, slowed down, and far more incomprehensible as they call for any help at all. The gas being filled with ash and smoke as the same incoherent pleads for an end to the pain to continue. All while horde strings play behind it with horror movie shrills playing through whistles and echoes. The dense atmosphere becomes gothic through this cold, uncaring world. Death rattles play through the monotony of the track with little format as the screams barely manage to escape the cacophony of noise. It sounds threatening all throughout. After two heavy and harsh tracks, this one sounds like giving up to the horror. Living through the pain as a wave of blood and violence overwhelms you. The hope is all lost, the terror has begun, and no end is anywhere in sight. The track stews and boils in the noise towards the end. One long episode of agony before ending in feedback and slowly fading into a muddy nothing. The apocalyptic doom metal I coined in the Dead Times video comes from this track. The extreme grunge through the track feels like straight ambience. It fits into the album's mood of pure anguish, while also creating this world that just seems to be rotting and creaking, imploding at every moment and existing in pure pain and numbness. The infinite night being this terminally long darkness which becomes all that you can think about. Having some darker moments myself, they feel like this. Grungy, filthy, and sticky. Just this pure terror of being stuck and unable to think of anything else besides the absolute worst. Violence, anxiety, and pessimism, constantly that loops in a panic. By far one of the more known The Body tracks, it begins with a person noting somebody else's suicide.
Recently another guy just killed himself the other day, and he left a note saying that y'all have to live around all this craziness and I'm gone.
The track blows up into electric feedback, harsh industrial bangs, and a steady hi-hat. The screams in the song are far less distorted than before, but still ravaged by cries and pain. They sound like they're actively being tortured and pleading for it to finish, screaming through gnashed teeth, grunts, and cries. creating some of the most visceral agony portrayed in any album on the planet. The instrumentals here are particularly brutal, giving off this dangerous sense to the song, along with the occasional plucks and electronic warnings. The first part moves into a more cautious and strange second part, which contains more order but lacks any kind of coherence, as the screams continue sounding like the singer trying to say, "Stop, stop, I'll kill all of you." Before the original screams resume as harsh industrial slams smash down through the chorus amongst high-pitched feedback. The tone of the song is filled with this tight metallic atmosphere. Not a single moment goes by that doesn't feel like pure hell. It becomes so dense with feedback and noise, drills spinning into your earlobes, the track becomes nearly impossible to respond to. It's just pure sensory overload, even as the song collapses into a black hole as everything falls apart. The song just feels like torture. Being so confined to pain and agony, it almost becomes a religion, becoming attached to it and personalizing it into yourself, while also dwelling in sarcasm as you absolve the pain, seeing no way to recover or escape from it. Almost done. Our Souls Were Clean starts with a wall of fuzz. A gentle pad and a fast-paced synth plays beyond it like sirens and an incoming signal. As they calm down, a single kick drum plays like a heartbeat. This faster tone feels more urgent, especially as the industrial grime reminds me more of Miu than the prior attack we heard in the album before. It also sounds a bit more worrying, as if the dread has evolved into fear. Through the lower grumbles of the drums and hi-hats come a guitar riff in a fairly stilted and synthetic tone. The intro transforms into a more held down and grimy beat, which sounds more drill or trap beat style rather than the electro metal we had before. It actually gives the song a lot more grime and makes it filthy and nauseous. A wave of harsh feedback and brutal industrial drums turn the growls of pain into the familiar cries from before, howling and wailing over the instruments which rumble like an earthquake as the drum bangs behind it. Along with another howl or siren playing below it through the wall of sound. The song almost sounds like a tornado at this stage. It ends in a distorted tune, someone singing raspy words for only a few seconds as the noise suddenly stops. The title almost gives me the impression of a lamented horror. Our souls were clean. There was a point when we weren't pawns to a great machine meant to scrub the life out of anyone who gets caught. There was a point where the horror of agony wasn't present, that we were pure, but at some point our blood became sludge and the light faded. The closer begins with slowed down poetry from a sample about the failure of God to step in and stop suffering.
To the lie of lips that betrayed me, to the deadly coldness of the eyes.
The song begins with frantic strings playing through the dense fog as subtle bass wobbles back and forth through the song. Drums occasionally slam and the bass below it is gloomy and tense. The beginning is quiet and filled with build-up, creating this nervous tension before the song prepares to explode proper. A threatening low sub-bass and rumbling kick drum plays as the song proper slowly starts to inch closer and closer. The buildup is dense but subtle and stays below as the strings continue to harp and creak. Spoken words echo and repeat into the darkness. Once the harsh guitars finally come in with a foreboding drum gently tapping along, occasionally voices speak in the background. Darkness surrounds us becomes the great violent supernova of the album. vocals are as strained and high-pitched as they could be, echoing far more than before as they call out. The drums sound like gears thrashing slowly and grinding against themselves. The guitars are shrill and sound more like combustion engines rather than strings. The drums are muted behind the waves of noise. The song ends with electronic wails from the distorted guitar thumping in and out of life, playing a final coda as the noise wobbles before the feedback ends the album. It feels as peaceful and cathartic as it does exhausting.
Editor, play all songs at once.
The electronic, industrial metal, and noise all just perfectly intersect here. I listened to this for the first time with some shitty earbuds I bought for $20. I have money now because I live in Genocidetopia, so I got to listen to this with proper headphones. These ones were on clearance for $90. Anyway, it sounded genuinely incredible and almost like a dying machine creaking and begging for help. The entire album is filled with rot, sludge, smoke, and blood. The constant cries through the album sounded like so much, almost as if they're not meant to say anything specific, rather set in that these are pleads and cries for help. I swear I kept hearing "I'm so hungry" through the lyrics again and again. I kept feeling myself crying out in tears and drool for anyone, anything to stop the horrible pain. It just keeps growing and going. Make it stop! Regarding that nihilistic and misanthropic take of pain and suffering, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I spend a lot of my life in pain. It's not severe, but I also wonder if that's only because I was trained to put up with it. My parents and grandparents all had crippling pain. I have friends who shared the same thing, and that doesn't include mental pain. That doesn't include pain from trauma or grief. However, even through the worst moments where all I could do was cry, could scream, where I bawled out of a shock when I saw them take my mother's dead body away, when I was stranded out in a blizzard at -3 and couldn't get a ride home, or when I slipped a disc and was only able to scream in agony out in the open, I never had a moment where I considered giving it all up. I'm not sure why. Maybe that's because if I don't, I'll get to listen to more albums by the body. Maybe that's because if I don't, I'll get to listen to more albums by the body about why I should. But I don't think the album is telling you to kill yourself. That's a stretch. Rather, an album like I Shall Die Here meets at that connection. Those lonely, desolate, and painful moments of life that don't feel like they're worth living. And then there are days when it doesn't hurt. When I wake up and I get to see the sun crawl up the horizon, I get to see that beautiful orange glow over the mountains. It's small, but I live for those mornings. I want to be clear that despite the themes, I don't endorse committing suicide. Think of it like this. Whenever you hear somebody say you're not alone, it's not just pandering or fine gesture. It's a statement of, I did it and you can do it too. If they could get by the worst moments of their life, then maybe you could do too. I Shall Die Here is a statement, but also a proclamation. The realization that the reality you live in, the pain, the hell, the pure, horrible agony will never end. That the planet you are stuck on has no escape. No amount of crying or pleading will be heard. The world is empty and cold. Each inhabitant is blocking you out at all moments. You are stuck here to die, and that is it. You can either choose to live your life in pure pain forever and find no grace at the end, or find solace in the knowledge that you alone have the power to end it. You are a disease, a musk on this planet left to die on, to be alone and tormented by yourself as the world collapses. It's a nightmare. This album is genuinely scary to me. The sounds, the tone, the screams, and the fucking lyrics. I listen to this with my adrenaline high because it just horrifies me. Over the years, that has cooled off, but I still find myself disturbed and unsettled by how unrelenting and confronting it is. I Shall Die Here is about pain. It's about hurting, and it's about expressing that pain. When my opioids wear off, I'll be back to the pain in my gums, my hip, and whatever else. I don't have health insurance and won't have it for a while. I don't live by a good clinic. I'll just know that I shall die here. I'm sad now.
I'm sorry, did I wake you up? I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to wake you up.
How you doing, Scott?
If you sit down, I'll go pet you, okay?